Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. You're watching another episode of The Naturalist Capitalist, and I'm coming to you from my sleeper cab in my truck. I'm on the road this time, not back at the studio, but it's all good. I've got Kevin Kahn on the show today. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm good, Reed. How are you?
I'm doing well. So you're running for United States Congress from Ohio's 1st District. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've done for work, what qualifies you for the position, and why you've decided to run this year?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for inviting me on.
Absolutely.
I'm a business owner. I'm an entrepreneur. I specialize in exporting made in the USA industrial products, valves, pipes, fittings, things like that. I've been doing it for 23 years, quite a bit. So for a while, for the first half, I worked for one of the factories that I now represent now, and about 13 years ago, I started my own business, and I represent 8 American factories exporting their stuff mostly into Asia, doing their sales and after sales service there. Um, I've been, I call it, I've leaned libertarian for a while. I voted libertarian, but I haven't been a political activist up until this year. And
Right.
what got me started, I'm married to an immigrant. My wife is from Mongolia. I have 2 kids. One was born here. The older one was born here. The youngest one was born in Mongolia. And during the summertime, when school's out, we had pre-COVID time. We had decamped and spent the summers in Mongolia, where my wife can spend time with her family and the kids with their cousins and so on. My youngest one is now 2.5. So last summer, coming back last August, she was 1.5. And I think, like quite a few libertarians who've become more active, I had a really negative interaction with the federal government. After a long flight that started in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, went through Beijing, China, and arriving in San Francisco, we came upon a Customs and Border Patrol officer who was checking our passports, and my daughter, who was born there, carries 2 passports, a U.S. one and a Mongolian one. We travel with our marriage license. We travel with her birth certificate. But the guy either wanted to flex some authority, or wasn't getting why she had 2 passports, and why in some places we would travel with using one and some with the other because of visa requirements. And after 17 hours, instead of welcome back to the U.S. Con family, is this your final destination? No, we live in Cincinnati. Great, have a good rest of your trip home. We were in secondary security with armed ICE officers, and
Right.
kind of going through the explanation of how my daughter is my daughter and why she has 2 passports, and it hit me. This was not too long after we were seeing lots of video footage of what was going on in the southern border with immigrant children being separated and kept in cages, and I'm thinking these folks think they have the authority to separate my daughter from us, and if they tried to, I'm not actually sure how I would stop it. It scared the crap out of me, frankly.
Right.
And it clicked that we shouldn't be in a position where our government has that much power over us. And nothing happened. We got through it. We were released and picked up our luggage and finished the trip. But I got back home and contacted the Libertarian Party of Ohio and said, I'm ready to do something this election cycle. Tell me what you want. I can do something local. I could do something state. I can do something federal. And in Ohio, people get to register their political party based on the primary ballot that they choose. So when we went through primaries in the spring, you had a choice to pick a Republican ballot or a Democratic ballot, or because we decided that I would run for federal position for Congress in the two counties that cover my district, folks had an opportunity to pull a libertarian ballot, or you can pull an issues only ballot and remain independent. But by choosing the federal race, we were able to get a larger selection of people to choose to be libertarian, formally registered, than any other position that I could have run for. And it's the first time that folks in Southwest Ohio had the opportunity to register as a libertarian in about 8 years. Yeah, that's how we started, and it's kind of interesting. I wasn't sure what to expect. I'm not a professional politician. I don't know that much about campaigning. Being in the export business, I generally travel a lot away from home, 2/3 of the time. So actually, the whole situation with COVID is kind of helped what we're trying to do as far as looking for a win here in District 1. My opponents, they don't run polls with my name in it, so I don't have any formal polls to point to say how I'm doing. But there are informal ways to look, third party polls that are call it non-biased or non-partisan. I could look at likes on Facebook and Twitter and stuff, and I think I'm in the low double digits. And my win number is 35%. I need to get about 160,000 votes, and I think the next couple months will show whether or not we can do that or not. But it's not unobtainable.
All right, yeah, let's talk about your opponents, because you just brought them up. The incumbent Republican and then the Democrat who will also be running to replace him alongside you. What's your personal opinion of them, and what do you think makes you a better candidate? I know that's a really broad topic, but just try to narrow it down to a few things.
Sure. Well, I think that it's very easy to distinguish myself against the two of them, because on 80% of the issues they'll vote the same way.
Right.
The Republican is not he's not a libertarian Republican. He's he's a solid statist, and even though he's been there for 24 years, I would say his claim to fame was his first term in office. He was one of the 13 House managers that impeached Bill Clinton. Mm-hmm. And after that, he's serving his time.
Yeah.
He sits on his committees and he does what he needs to do, but there's no landmark legislation. If I say his name to people who are moderately familiar with politics, they probably don't know it. Right. So we're in a gerrymandered district like a lot of the country, and he is a candidate that takes what should be a 60-40 Republican district and makes it a toss-up.
So, what's his name?
Steve Chabot.
Steve Chabot. Okay. And then the Democrat?
Democrat's name is Kate Schroeder. I think this is the first run for office she's making, but she's kind of tied into the Democratic machine. She worked for Senator Evan Bayh in Indiana for a few years, and then she worked for the Clinton Foundation. She's a healthcare executive. Spent some time overseas. I met her at a July 4th. We call it a reverse parade. It was kind of interesting where the float stayed still and the cars drove through, and that was because of COVID. But we ran into each other. She seemed pleasant enough. She's got an MBA from Wharton, so you'd think that she has a modicum of intelligence. But if you go to her campaign website, there's a lot of policy issues listed, but not really a lot of solutions. It's
Right.
a lot of marketing phrases. I want to do common sense this. I want to have dialogue, but nothing, not really a lot that you could grab onto and say, if she goes to Congress, this is what she's going to accomplish. It's pretty easy to tell that she's just going to vote the way she's told to vote by the Democratic leadership.
Right.
One of the issues that uh, has hit Ohio recently is we found out that the Ohio Democratic Party took close to 300 and I think it was $334,000 in PPP loans.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, while small family-owned businesses are going bankrupt because PPP ran out of money, they took the loans, and even Tom Perez, the DNC chair, said,
Yep.
"Give the money back." That's not that's not the use of the money. I guess he told that to two states, Florida and Ohio, and Florida did give the money back, and Ohio didn't.
Nice.
And I haven't seen one Ohio candidate, including Mrs. Schroeder, say, "Yeah, this is wrong." And it makes you think that, either she's indifferent to the unethical use and perception, or she doesn't have the moral gumption to say something to her own party in the state of Ohio. And that would lead me to question what would she be able to say to the Democrats in Washington if there was something that they were looking to do that was counterproductive to representing the first district of Ohio.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Reading through your website, I kind of get that vibe that you just presented right there, that the Democrats and Republicans really don't want to fix anything. They like causing problems and then blaming each other for them. And as you said, you want people who have solutions. And I also see that looking at your website. So what are the most important issues to you? You've already kind of said immigration, but do you want to just list a few that are really important, and then we'll dive into each of those and kind of talk about them more, see what your views
Yeah,
are.
sure. I'll give you three important ones, and I won't say that they're in any order, but just the lead in that you gave. I think a great example is criminal justice reform, and we're talking about the Democrats and the Republicans not really getting stuff done.
Right.
I in my campaign I had been talking about qualified immunity from before George Floyd and before Breonna Taylor. I kind of started on it with Duncan Lemp, and then recently, or shortly after that, in Cincinnati, there was a case of a man named Quandavier Hicks who had been killed by police, and the police were let off because of qualified immunity, and his family brought it to the appellate court, and they actually ruled no. We're going to bring this back to court, and I thought that was great, and I started talking about that. So as a lot of libertarians know, after George Floyd was murdered by police in Minneapolis, Justin Amash put in an end qualified immunity bill in Congress, and he had a lot of the progressive Democrats jump on really quickly.
Yeah.
I think he had one Republican to make it the first tripartisan bill, and now we're in 2+ months later, and they're not bringing it to a vote.
Right.
And the Senate Republicans kind of did their criminal justice police reform thing in the Senate, and they voted on it and they passed. And then the Democrats did the same thing in the House and voted on it and they passed it. And they're not sending it to each other. There's
Right.
absolutely no intention to progress this issue.
Right.
And Congressman Amash's it's a single issue. It can be an up or down vote, and
Right.
they're not bringing it to a vote.
I think it's like 2 or 3 pages long, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or one, or I mean, it's incredibly short. I've read it. So.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's no pork in it. The downside for the duopoly is that depending how they vote, they may lose police union donations.
Right.
But it's just something that they're not going to fix. So that's an issue. I've got a fairly thorough criminal justice reform that follows along with what Joe Jorgensen and Spike are talking about: ending the war on drugs, ending qualified immunity, ending civil asset forfeiture, ending no-knock warrants. And I have a caveat on not really reparations, but restitution for the folks who have been in prison for victimless crimes. We need to get them back into society with an expunged record so that they can get jobs. And I think that some restitution has to be made as far as allowing them maybe interest-free loans to buy homes based on the income that they weren't able to earn being locked up. You know, we've had separated families. Hopefully that they'll get back together. And we know that single parent families affects the educational success of the children. And let's find a way to make that right without adding on to the debt, but using the power of the government to kind of right some wrongs there. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the main issues that I'm focusing on. Okay. One of the big ones, another big one is just the federal debt and deficit spending. And as I've been going through my campaign, I've come up with a description that I'm comfortable with, just saying that we're actually witnessing the largest transfer of wealth, redistribution of wealth in humankind, and it's from our kids and our grandkids and future generations to us. Yeah, we are taking economic opportunity away from people who can't vote yet, maybe who haven't even been born yet, by continually adding on to the debt. So I'm making it very clear that I will not vote for any budget that requires deficit spending. We've got to either freeze the debt level where we are and grow our GDP to make it manageable, or we've got to get to surplus and start paying it down.
But Kevin, I've got a question. Haven't we had a conservative president and we had a conservative supermajority, and now we still have a conservative Senate? And are you saying we're still not balancing the budget? Is that what's going on?
That is exactly what's going on. We haven't had, I think it's 25 years, 24, 25 years since a Republican Congress has offered a balanced budget, and close to 50 years since a Democratic Congress have offered that. Yeah. So there is a lot of messaging, but not a lot of substance to what the fiscal hawks have been talking about for the past couple of decades. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. And I would say that another just group of issues is the infringement of individual rights in general. Mr. Chabot is a Republican who has gotten NRA endorsements before. They haven't given him one this year, but he claims to be a pro-gun, a pro-2A guy. But he is a co-sponsor of the new House Resolution 838, which if you're not familiar with, or maybe you are, but I describe it as the Minority Report legislation. If you know that movie where they kind of predict crimes and then arrest people before it happens. This is similar to what they're talking about, is predicting bad circumstances and then going in and using red flags or whatever to disarm people or prevent crimes. And that's scary. It's right. I myself, with my story, the government can make mistakes. Right. So I started off my campaign with a very strong, I wouldn't say I'm a gun nut, but I am a due process nut. I don't want to see any legislation where people lose their constitutional rights without getting due process. Right. On any amendment. Yeah. So whether it's Second Amendment, whether it's the Fourth Amendment because of qualified immunity, or the Fifth Amendment because of civil asset forfeiture, That's something that I'm focusing on heavily, that the government only has authority by our consent. And I don't think people realize how much, the government is taking away from us.
Right.
And using the elections as our consent. But I don't know that people understand what we've given up through continual renewal of the Patriot Act and things of that sort. So that's I'm spending a lot of time trying to educate and focus on that. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So let's kind of peel back the onion on a few of those issues. We'll work our way backward since we're talking about constitutional rights right now. What I've noticed is with society kind of falling apart around us, I've seen a lot of progressives realize how important the Constitution, the rule of law, the Second Amendment, a lot of things that maybe they weren't extremely big on before, they've come full circle on. They've come around, and they're kind of, a lot of progressive leftists are really sick of the Democrat Party, and they're starting to look at the Libertarian Party. And even though they don't agree with us on some economic things, I've found that that's a bridge for starting new conversations, bringing new people in, and then when you show them what you agree on them with, then you can start showing them where you disagree and trying to dismantle some of the things that they've thought. So on civil liberties and protections against the state, is that something you think you can reach out to progressives in Ohio? I know Dennis Kucinich is from Ohio, so I don't know how many. I don't know how big of a progressive movement there is there, but is that something that you think you could really reach out to them with and show them that you'll work with them there?
Yeah, absolutely. So another one of the kind of the creative phrases that I've become comfortable with in my campaign is exactly what you were talking about. When people are seeing what powers the government have, what authorities they take, or what liberties they take away from us, point it out and realize, if you don't want the government to have the authority to do that to you or your family, don't give them the authority to do that to your political opponents.
Right.
we can control the size and scope of the government and what we allow them to do. But what we can't control is the character or the competence or the intent of the people we elect to office.
Right.
Nor the bureaucrats that they appoint, the unelected people. So government power is neutral, and it's just used how the people who wield it use it. If you don't want them to be able to do something, don't give them that power. And that's basically the basis of the discussion on what's been going on, whether it was Portland or the Patriot Act, for a lot of these things, that between the fear mongering and the law and order, you have to get to the folks and say, we can't let government do this to anybody.
Right.
And when we get to the progressives, and you're right, a lot of it is more economic differences. And I like to start with, let's repeal some of the laws that give us a structure that we both agree on, and that could be the war on drugs, or that could be a lot of the criminal justice reform, and then talk about and this is another thing that I found is a lot of people don't equate federal government money as our money that's been taken.
Right.
Right. And I see discussions here in Cincinnati. We have a local issue here about a streetcar that's not meeting its revenue target or its funding, and Cincinnati's in a hole for $1 million, and they're hoping that they'll get millions of dollars of government bailout. And what I try to discuss with the progressives to maybe open their eyes, or at least show them the way that libertarians look at it is, you know, we can't talk about free education, free healthcare. It's not free. It's going to be paid for by future generations. But let's have the discussion. Tell me what the cost is.
Right.
What's the price tag? And if we can fit that into a balanced budget, maybe that's a way we start.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't fund free this, free that. Hundreds of millions or billions of dollars for war overseas with the revenue that we generate.
Right.
It's impossible.
Yep.
And I think we have a pretty good understanding of what happens if, one, we keep building up the debt, we get to a point where we can't pay it back, or two, we just keep printing money and inflate ourselves into oblivion. And both of those things have actually happened to countries in our lifetime, and we can point and say this is the road we're on.
Right.
And
I kind of want to merge into that because that's the next issue, the debt. A lot of people have seen, when we've had an economic crisis like we're in now, we have things like the CARES Act and the HEROES Act, which hasn't passed, but it's still in there, and it's, we can print off all these trillions of dollars or borrow it and bail out corporations or state governments or interest groups. Why can't we do that for ourselves? And we did it in 2008 too. We bailed out all these big companies, bailed out Wall Street. But why, if we've gotten away with that, why can't we just do it for ourselves? So something I've been trying to explain to them is we haven't gotten away with it. We are hurting from it now. A lot of people don't realize gold has gone over $2,000 an ounce. They don't realize, the repercussions of having the world reserve currency and what responsibility that means to having a sound fiscal policy. They think a lot of younger people, and not some that aren't even younger, they think because we've gotten away with it this long, we can continue to do it to get ourselves out of this hole. So what would you say to those people? How do you combat that logic?
Yeah. So the first thing I think is take it to the extreme and say, okay, if just printing money when we need it is a good answer, why do we even go to work? Why don't we just sit back and let the government pay us all $200,000 a year? Just print off the money. What's the end result of that happening?
Yep.
And get them to understand why that doesn't work.
Right.
And then work backwards. The difficult thing is saying what's the tipping point.
Yeah.
So I've heard things about Social Security will be bankrupt in 2035. I don't know if I have the knowledge or even the resources to find the research to say that's absolutely true. But it's going to be soon. It's probably within our lifetime. And I know the economic background of why that happens, because Social Security holds 25 to 30% of our debt.
Right.
If we don't pay off the T-bills, the Social Security doesn't have money to get paid. Right now, our debt is at $26.5 trillion. And another eye opener is we're at like super low interest rates right now.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
If interest goes up 1%, that's another $265 billion a year just of interest that we have to pay to attract non-government holders to buy treasury bills. And I think that's around the corner even faster than Social Security going bankrupt. Is if we just keep printing money, corporations and foreign governments are going to want a higher interest rate.
Yeah. Because
we're deflating the value of the currency more than the interest that they're getting. It's a losing proposition.
Right.
So we have to work that economics with them to explain it, to say why this isn't a sustainable answer for our economic issues. Yeah.
Right. On criminal justice reform, uh, there's been a lot of extremities thrown out there. So there have been, I think pretty much everybody realizes we have to do something, that the police are not held accountable enough. But then people also see, these crazy protests, property getting damaged. They see people screaming like abolish the police, and they're scared. So they want to know, like, what is a realistic solution where we can hold the police accountable, but also not just throw them out the window and just have complete anarchy. That's how they're looking at it. So you mentioned qualified immunity, civil asset forfeiture, no knock raids, getting rid of those things.
Yeah.
What do you think? Aside from those specific issues, is there like a general problem with the militarization or the amount of funding they get, or how can we? What's like an overall solution to this approach that we can use?
Sure. I actually, I lose track of time in COVID time here. I work a lot out of home, but I went to the local FOP, the Cincinnati FOP, for the endorsement interview, and it was kind of interesting. I knew I wasn't getting an endorsement, and I showed up. There were about 15 people. A couple of them had their Steve Chabot cups on the table, and but we had a really good conversation. I mean, they just started off and they said, "Look, we've been to your website. You know, ending qualified immunity is a non-starter for us.
Nice.
How can we expect to do our jobs without qualified immunity?" And it was a little snide, but the first answer I said was, well, qualified immunity kind of started around the end of the 60s, or in the mid 60s, and kind of got solidified in the 80s. This department's 100 years old. What did you do before that? Just do that again. But the real answer, the suggested answer here in Ohio, it's crazy. To become a police officer, you need to go through about 750 hours of training. To become a hairdresser, you need to go through 1,200 hours of training. It's almost double, not quite. But I told them, I said, look, we have to replace qualified immunity with private misconduct insurance. And I understand that that's going to be expensive. I also think that if you're going to be equipped with weapons that can kill civilians, and you yourselves are civilians, you're our neighbors, and you're entrusted to do the right thing, and you also trust us not to kill you for stupid stuff, you've got to be treated at a higher professional level than you are now.
Right.
We need more training. You need to get better pay. You need to carry this insurance, because that is the mechanism by which we weed out the police that shouldn't be carrying arms or having that responsibility.
Right.
And they said, well, what about the budget? We're already at, in Cincinnati, I think it's 3/4 of the city budget is the police. It's at $1.5 million or so, or 150 million, something like that. I said, well, here's the good news. We want to reduce your workload. All those victimless crimes that you're worrying about, that's not going to be your responsibility anymore.
Right.
Seatbelts, speeding, drug use, possession. If there's no victim being harmed, not your guy's deal anymore. So we're eventually going to thin the ranks with a bunch of real professional law enforcement people. And I think that's the solution. And they kind of fought back and said, well, have you ever dealt with people with drugs, and the healthcare workers won't go there unless we're on the scene? I said, we have a couple of examples. We have what happened in the 1920s here with prohibition, and when we decriminalized or re-legalized alcohol, it didn't kill society. We're getting along fine. drugs is a big deal. I mean, we've been out at the war of drugs for 50 years. So, but
Right.
we do have an example in Europe. Portugal has been on a very aggressive drug decriminalization program. They've been at it for 16 years. And if you look at the results, it checks all the boxes you would want to check. Overdose deaths have gone down, violence has gone down, even in the 15 to 24 age group of experimental people who would try drugs, for their first time, has gone down. And it hasn't negatively affected the police force or the health services at all. And I said, it's time to try something else, because if it's doing the same thing that we've been doing, there's no reform, there's no change. What's going to change? So I think that's one of the big areas where I'm different than my two opponents. When we talked about the end qualified immunity and the Democrats coming on, Joe Biden basically said, "Yeah, I'm not for ending qualified immunity,"
Right.
and that basically shut all the Democrats up. Right? He's the leader now. And the Republicans were never really for that. A couple, the Libertarian, maybe Thomas Massey or Rand Paul, but
Right.
Generally on the authoritarian versus libertarian issues, you're getting 70 to 80% of the Democrats and Republicans voting together to be more authoritarian, and I think it's time for a different approach. They've run the system for 160 years. There are a lot of people clamoring for change. It isn't happening fast enough. And I think it's time for a reset on a lot of things.
Yeah. Just to clarify, Thomas Massey has not said anything about qualified immunity.
Yeah.
Rand Paul's been pretty good on it, but anyone who's watching this, I've been pressuring Thomas Massey to co-sponsor Amash's bill and to say something about it. So anyone who's watching this, make sure you jump on that bandwagon.
Yeah, he's actually my adjacent territory across the river. So first district of Ohio is Cincinnati. We're on the Ohio River. His northern Kentucky district is on the other side of the bridge.
Oh, you'll be in good company then. So
yeah. And initially I was looking, and I know Justin Amash has called him his best friend in Congress. I know they're pretty close. And because of him voting against the CARES Act, the Republicans actually primaried him.
Yeah, right.
So I was thinking that he was being quiet until he got through his primary, which I think he won 80 to 20%. Right. It was pretty good thrashing. Yeah. But yeah, I'm surprised he hasn't said anything since then, because he's now pretty much free and clear in his election.
Yeah, he should co-sponsor that bill and then endorse Brad Barron over Mitch McConnell. That's my opinion. So let's go to immigration, because that was the other one. You've made it pretty obvious that you think we need reform, and that children shouldn't be separated from their parents at the border, all that type of thing. So how extreme do we go? Because this is another area where people get nervous when they hear libertarians talk. When they hear open borders, they just picture, thousands of immigrants just flowing across the border and, just complete chaos. What do you think should be done? What level of security should we have? What things need to be pulled back? What things should stay? What would give us a humane immigration process, but also not be a disaster, in your opinion?
Yeah, I would say the Ellis Island model may be a little stricter because technology is better. Show up, have your cursory criminal record check, have your cursory health check, and give them a work permit, and say welcome, with no expectation of being able to get welfare like right now. Yep. Immigrants are I think it's 3 or 5 years before they're able to qualify, but no expectation. This is one of the areas that and I would like to see Social Security move towards having the option of being privatized. But this would be one of the areas that would help Social Security. We need more workers paying into the system,
Right.
and immigration is the easiest way to get that accomplished.
Yeah.
In addition to my personal story of crossing the border, I've got one more real story and one more hypothetical. But so I mentioned my wife's an immigrant from Mongolia. 2 years back, my brother-in-law there got into the Wharton School of Business for his MBA and was not issued a student visa. So here we have a guy, a student who is willing to come here with his wife and his son and probably pay, I don't know what it is, $60,000 or $70,000 a year in tuition. Plus they would have rented an apartment. Plus they would have bought a car. Plus, perhaps my sister-in-law would have worked. But this would have been a net gain for our economy. It's
Right.
not really an export, but it kind of is.
Yeah.
We're bringing wealth from overseas into our community. But instead, he went to the UK and he got his degree there. And now he works for a UK company and he sells UK manufactured goods back in Mongolia, and it's a lost opportunity.
Right.
And it's a shame. So that's the real story. We need to make that easier. The hypothetical is I have another sister-in-law, who she would just wanted to come visit for when her son was out of school. They have a month break from Christmas to February, and they wanted to come visit, and they got denied their travel visa, which, again, I don't know why. But even if she wanted to come, Cincinnati doesn't have a huge Mongolian population. The whole world doesn't have one. There are 3 million in Mongolia. And the U.S. has pockets, a couple thousand here or there, Chicago, Washington, the West Coast cities. What would be the harm if she wanted to come here and say, I'm going to open up a Mongolian cuisine restaurant in Cincinnati? There is not one for 300 miles.
Right.
It would add to our culture. She would employ certain, some people, but the opportunity's not there. And our country was built on wave after wave of immigration.
Right.
And it's the fear mongering to keep us at each other's throat.
Right.
It was interesting as I was doing some research. If you want to read something interesting, I don't know how much you've researched immigration. Read Bill Clinton and the Democratic Immigration Platform from 1996. It is almost word for word what you'd hear out of Trump's mouth.
Yeah, right.
Rapists, murderers coming across the border. They were not a pro-immigration party.
Yeah, in
what
fact,
changed?
The Trump campaign often shows a lot of videos of Bill Clinton talking, I mean, they use it to their point, see, the Democrats used to think this, and yeah, totally.
Yeah. The big change was the AFL-CIO woke up and found out they were losing membership. Where's their new base of membership? If we bring immigrants in and they're tradesmen, tradeswomen, tradespeople, right? They can join the unions.
Right.
So all of a sudden the AFL-CIO went from, immigrants keep the wages down, they steal our jobs, to we really like these people. They should be allowed in. Yeah. Following them and their donations, the Democrats flipped.
Right.
It's not a principle thing about we should be the land of liberty.
Right.
It's we're going to keep getting AFL-CIO donations if we change our stance.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. No, I mean,
so
that's you mentioned the NRA before, and now you're talking about that with immigration. That's really all the two parties care about. I mean, they hold their voters captive, and all they do it for is to get their money. And the Democrat and Republican parties, a lot of people don't realize they're private organizations that don't have to even honor the voting system that they use, and they just rack up billions of dollars off of their voters, and their
Yeah,
voters have
I I
Stockholm
I
syndrome
have
and keep
that
voting
that
for them.
conversation a lot. And that's another thing that doesn't click with a lot of people. I talk. I think every libertarian talks a lot about ballot access
Right.
and how unfair it is. And people say, well, what I hear is, why are you running a president? First, you have to win at the mayor and city level and build your base up. And you explain to them, we can't do that without running a president. Otherwise, we're not allowed to have a party.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you talk about the financial burden. We lost ballot access in Ohio in 2015, I guess 2015, and it took $250,000, hundreds of thousands of hours of canvassing to get 100,000 signatures to get back on the ballot. And I say, imagine if we took that money every 2 years, every 4 years, whatever it is, and put it into campaigns.
Yeah, no kidding.
we would be able to get some traction, but no, right? And I said, and what about party primaries? Why am I paying for your party primary? I understand that states have the job to run elections, but the Democrats and the Republicans are private organizations. Why are taxpayer dollars funding that?
Right.
If the state government has the system, if they you have an election system, pay them to use it.
Yeah.
Don't charge the taxpayers. You're a private organization. Pay for your own damn primaries.
Yeah, it's really corporatism and cronyism at its best. It's a perfect example of how we call this a free market, but things are rigged for big corporations, and that's how our voting system is too. It's rigged for the Democrats and Republicans. It's totally rigged against the small people, and the more laws they can add, the more they can crush us. I mean, it's the same with the economy. But I want to we'll start closing out here, but I just want to ask, what can we do to help your campaign? What do you need the most? You looking for publicity? You looking for donations? Looking for volunteers? How can people help? What do you want them to do?
The most important right now is donations, and it's funny you mentioned that. So today it was announced. So as I had mentioned, we're a toss-up, and the Republicans just committed to giving Mr. Chabot another $755,000 of ad spend in the Cincinnati market because it's a toss-up. So we've been really good at my campaign, which has pretty much been self-financed. We've had some donations, but and we're making an impact. But just the little things like getting more yard signs out, getting one or two more or radio ads out, and it'll help canvass the area. I don't know what I'm missing, but I know I'm missing because it's a big race. So that would be the biggest help. It's and the my website is Kahn with the number 4, and Kahn is KAHN, the number 4 Congress.com, and I have all the links there to volunteering, to donation, to my stances on the issues at the website. That would be the biggest help. If there are people who are great at phone banking, we would love phone bankers. That's something that would help. As you know, with the Jorgensen-Cohen campaign, they're really letting the states kind of run the different campaigns, and we're going to be getting some free canvassing software. And my daughter's coming to say goodnight. Here, you want to say goodbye? This is the one that got caught at. This is the one that got caught at immigration.
Oh, nice.
This was the big threat. Yeah.
Okay, guys, you heard him. Go to his website. I'll have a link in the description of the video. Make sure we give him a hand, give him as much publicity as possible. I just want to thank you for coming on, and I'll just give you the last word to close out.
Okay. Well, first, thanks for inviting me. one thing I can say is, being the accidental candidate that I am, it's been fantastic the support that I've got from the libertarian community. After I announced, I had people in Southwest Ohio jump on board immediately. We've got a campaign staff now of about 20, and one of the goals was to grow the grassroots of the party, and we're achieving that. And we've formed the Hamilton County Libertarian Party. We've got 4 or 5 hands up already to run for office next election cycle. So I would just encourage everybody that make a difference, because just a little bit of time, even if it's a paper candidacy, brings attention to our party, and it's an easy message to sell. There are very few people who don't want more liberty or freedom, and let's show them the way, to be the first ones free and achieve freedom in our lifetime. Let's do that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, man. I wish you the best of luck. You have my support, and
Thank you.
everyone go help this guy out.